The rain poured down as a young girl stood trembling at the doorway. "Thief!" the woman shouted, shoving her into the street. Her small suitcase burst open, clothes scattering into the mud. A broken doll, her only treasure, lay face down in the dirt. Neighbors peeked through their windows, but no one moved. No hand reached out. No voice spoke for her. Kneeling in the rain, tears mixing with blood, she whispered, "Please, don't leave me here." And just when despair swallowed her, a tall man stepped forward. He placed a coat over her shoulders, lifted her gently, and said, "From now on, you come with me." Rain hammered down on the small coastal town of Grayford, where gulls circled over a harbor littered with rusting boats. 16-year-old Clara Henderson stood barefoot on the damp wooden floor of her family's cramped shack, clutching the frayed straps of her school bag. She was tall for her age, with a wiry frame hardened by years of chores, her dark eyes carrying the weight of secrets no teenager should bear. Her father, Victor Henderson, sat slumped in a chair by the window. Once a fisherman known for his strength and laughter, Victor had long abandoned the sea. His hands now trembled not from storms, but from the liquor bottle that rarely left his side. He was only 42, but the lines carved into his face and the gray in his beard made him look 20 years older. Clara's mother had left years ago, unable to bear Victor's drinking and unpredictable rage. That left Clara and her younger brother Evan to endure the fallout. At 12, Evan still carried a flicker of innocence, though Clara often caught him staring at the door, as if hoping their mother might one day return. On this particular morning, Clara had woken early, not because she wanted to go to school, but because she dreaded staying home. Nights in their shack were filled with her father's angry muttering, the crash of bottles, and sometimes worse, the sharp sound of a hand striking wood wall or flesh. When Clara tiptoed toward the door, Victor's voice cracked through the silence. "Where do you think you're going?" His tone was heavy, drenched in suspicion. "To school," Clara whispered. He rose unsteadily, blocking her path. "You think books will feed you. You think those people at school care about you more than I do." His bloodshot eyes searched her face. "They'll only teach you to hate me." Clara froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell him that she didn't need anyone's help to hate him, that every bruise, every scar, every sleepless night had already carved that lesson deep inside her. But she bit her tongue, knowing any answer might provoke him. Victor staggered closer, his breath sour with whiskey. He pressed a crumpled envelope into her hands. "Take this to that man at the docks. Don't open it." Clara glanced at the envelope. It wasn't the first time he'd sent her to deliver messages for his shady dealings with local debt collectors. She loathed being used as a pawn in his desperate attempts to cling to power. When she finally stepped outside, the salty wind whipped across her face. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she and Evan lived in a house with light in the windows, laughter at the table, and a father who loved them instead of destroying them. But Grayford had a way of strangling dreams, and Clara had learned to tuck her hopes away like forbidden treasures. At school, things weren't much easier. Clara's silence and bruises made her a target for whispers. Teachers noticed her fading grades but assumed she was lazy. Only one person seemed to look past the surface, Ms. Rivera, her history teacher, a woman in her 30s who had moved to Grayford from the city. That day after class, Ms. Rivera asked Clara to stay behind. "You've missed 3 assignments," she said gently. "And you look tired. Is something happening at home?" Clara stiffened. No one was supposed to ask. Exposing the truth felt like betrayal, even if it meant saving herself. She shook her head quickly. "I'm fine." But Ms. Rivera wasn't convinced. She handed Clara a small notebook. "If you ever need to talk, write it down. You don't even have to sign your name. Just don't carry it all alone." Clara tucked the notebook into her bag, unsure if she'd ever use it. Yet something in Ms. Rivera's steady gaze lingered with her like a lifeline stretched across turbulent water. That evening, Clara returned home to find Victor shouting at Evan for spilling soup. She rushed forward, placing herself between them. "It was an accident. Leave him alone." Victor's hand twitched as if he might strike her, but then he pulled back, muttering curses as he stumbled outside. The door slammed, rattling the walls. Clara hugged Evan tightly, whispering, "I won't let him hurt you. I promise." But as she said the words, doubt gnawed at her. She wasn't strong enough to stop Victor forever. And deep inside, she feared that her silence, her refusal to speak out to seek help, was slowly destroying them both. That night, while Evan slept, Clara opened Ms. Rivera's notebook. She picked up a pencil, hesitated, then wrote, "Sometimes I think my father is killing us, not just with his hands, but with the silence he forces on us. I don't know how much longer I can carry this." As the pencil scratched across the paper, tears spilled freely for the first time in years. Clara didn't know if Ms. Rivera would ever read her words, but in that moment writing felt like the first crack in the prison walls. The next morning, Clara carried the notebook in her bag, as if it were both a weapon and a wound. She didn't show it to anyone, not even Evan, who noticed her unusual quiet at breakfast. Victor had already gone, leaving behind the sour smell of whiskey and the shattered remains of another bottle on the floor. Clara cleaned the shards quickly before Evan's bare feet found them. "Stay inside after school," she instructed him, her tone sharper than she intended. "Don't wait for me outside the docks anymore." Evan frowned. "Why do you always go there?" Clara forced a smile. "It's just an errand. Nothing important." She couldn't tell him the truth that Victor used her to deliver money to the same men who threatened to break his legs when debts piled too high. At school, Ms. Rivera caught Clara lingering in the hall. "Did you write anything?" she asked softly. Clara hesitated, then nodded. She slid the notebook onto Ms. Rivera's desk. Don't tell anyone." "I won't," Ms. Rivera promised, her eyes warm with compassion. But Clara noticed something else, concern mixed with urgency. It frightened her. By evening, Clara learned why. Victor returned home earlier than usual, his face stormy. "Who have you been talking to?" he demanded, grabbing Clara by the wrist. No one, she lied, pulse racing. "Don't play games with me. That teacher Rivera. She's been sniffing around." He shoved her back, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can run to her? You think anyone in this town cares? They'll lock me up, and then what, you and your brother starve on the streets." Clara's chest burned with fury, but she swallowed her words. She knew resistance would only endanger Evan. That night, while Victor snored in his chair, Clara slipped outside and walked to the edge of the harbor. The waves slapped against the rotting wood, the smell of diesel mixing with salt. She wanted to scream, to throw the notebook into the water, to erase the danger her words had brought. But instead, she clutched it tighter, knowing it was the only proof she had left of the truth. The following week brought a betrayal Clara hadn't anticipated. One of the dock workers, a burly man named Curtis, who often exchanged envelopes with Victor, cornered her after school. His smile was thin, his voice too smooth. "Your dad owes more than he can pay. You're old enough now, aren't you? You'll work it off." Clara froze, terror rooting her to the spot. "Stay away from me." Curtis chuckled darkly. "You've got fire. But fire can be put out. Tell Victor he better pay up, or next time I won't just talk." She ran all the way home, chest heaving, her mind spiraling. It wasn't just Victor who was destroying her life. It was the men he dragged into it. And now they had their eyes on her. For days, Clara lived in constant fear. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow near the docks made her flinch. She withdrew even further at school, her exhaustion visible in the dark circles under her eyes. Evan asked questions she couldn't answer, and Ms. Rivera's gentle persistence only deepened the ache in her chest. Then came the breaking point. One evening, Clara arrived home to find Evan crying in their small room. His cheek bore a fresh red mark. "What happened?" she demanded. "He said I was useless!" Evan whispered, trembling. "He said I'd end up like him. I tried to say no, and he hit me." Clara's vision blurred with rage. She stormed into the main room where Victor sat with another bottle. "You touched him!" Her voice cracked like thunder. Victor looked up, unbothered. "He needs to toughen up. This world doesn't spare the weak." "You're the weak one," Clara screamed. "You hide in bottles while we suffer." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Victor rose. His face twisted with fury. For a moment, Clara thought he would strike her. Instead, he shoved the table, sending dishes crashing to the floor. "You think you're better than me. You think you can protect him. You can't even protect yourself." Clara grabbed Evan's hand and dragged him outside into the night. The air was cold, but she didn't care. She only knew one thing: she couldn't let this continue. They spent the night huddled under an abandoned boat by the shore. Evan's small body shivered against hers as he whispered, "Where will we go?" Clara stared at the distant lights of the town, her heart breaking. She had no answer. All she had was a notebook filled with words too dangerous to share a teacher who cared too much, and a father who had become her enemy. For the first time, she wondered if survival meant leaving Grayford behind forever, even if it meant betraying the only family she had left. The morning after, Clara led Evan to school early. She didn't want Victor to find them still hiding under the abandoned boat. Her hair was uncombed, her clothes rumpled, but she didn't care. Ms. Rivera noticed immediately. "Clara, what happened?" she asked gently, crouching down to meet Evan's frightened eyes. Clara wanted to tell her everything, to unload the weight of Curtis's threats, Victor's violence the night they spent in the cold. But the words caught in her throat. What if Ms. Rivera called the authorities? What if Evan was taken away from her? So she shook her head. "Nothing. Just tired." Ms. Rivera's eyes softened with a mixture of sadness and helplessness. "If you ever need help, my door is always open." That afternoon, Clara made a desperate choice. She sold her school bag, her only bag, at a second-hand shop, earning enough coins to buy bread and milk for Evan. When she handed him the food, he grinned and said, "You're the best sister in the world." But Clara didn't feel like the best. She felt like she was drowning in a sea where every wave was sharper than the last. Days blurred into weeks. Curtis lingered near the schoolyard, sometimes his presence a silent warning. Victor spiraled deeper, his temper more unpredictable, his demands harsher, and Clara, exhausted and cornered, began to slip. One evening, Victor accused her of stealing from him. "I didn't take your money," she cried. "Liar!" His fist slammed the table, making Evan flinch. "You've been sneaking out, selling things behind my back." Clara's throat tightened. "I sold my bag to feed us because you were too drunk to care." Victor's face went red. For a moment, his rage seemed to collapse into something else, shame maybe, or grief, but it quickly hardened again. "You ungrateful brat. You think you're better than me, but you'll end up just as rotten." The words cut deeper than any blow. That night, Clara lay awake, Evan's breathing steady beside her, and felt something inside her break. The next day, betrayal struck from a place she hadn't expected. At school, two girls snickered as she walked past. One whispered loudly, "Her dad's a drunk. I heard he owes money to half the town." Clara froze. "Where did you hear that?" she demanded. The girl smirked. "From my mom. She said a teacher's been asking questions about you. Guess people talk." Clara's chest tightened with panic. Ms. Rivera. She had promised not to tell, but she must have spoken to someone. Maybe the principal. Maybe a neighbor. By lunch, Clara couldn't stand it. She burst into Ms. Rivera's classroom. "You told them," she shouted, her voice raw. Ms. Rivera looked startled. "Clara, I didn't." "Don't lie." Tears blurred Clara's vision. "You said I could trust you, and now everyone knows. Do you have any idea what you've done? Victor will kill me if he finds out." Her hands shook as she slammed the notebook onto the desk. "Take it. Read it. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore." She stormed out, leaving Ms. Rivera stunned in silence. That night, Victor confronted her again. Word had spread about his debts, his violence. He accused Clara of betraying him. "You went running to that teacher, didn't you?" he growled, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. Clara wrenched free her voice, shaking with fury and fear. "You've already ruined everything. You don't need me to tell the world you've done it yourself." Victor's eyes blazed. For the first time, Clara thought he might actually strike her, but instead he laughed a low, broken sound that chilled her to the bone. "You think you can escape me?" "This is your life, Clara. You'll never leave it behind." Later that night, while Victor staggered drunk in the kitchen, Clara made another desperate decision. She packed a small bundle of clothes for Evan, stuffed a few coins into her pocket, and whispered into his ear, "We're leaving. Tonight." Evan's eyes widened. "But where will we go? Anywhere but here." They crept out into the night, the town asleep, the harbor silent under the pale glow of the moon. For the first time, Clara felt the faint sting of freedom on her skin. But fear walked beside her, whispering, "What if you fail? What if he finds you? What if you can't keep Evan safe?" As dawn approached Clara and Evan reached the edge of Grayford, standing at the fork in the road. One path led inland toward unknown towns and strangers. The other wound back toward the harbor, toward Victor Curtis and the life they had just fled. Clara clutched Evan's hand tightly. She had never felt so scared, so alone, and so responsible. But she knew one thing: turning back was no longer an option. The road beyond Grayford stretched endlessly, a ribbon of dirt, lined with wild grass that bent beneath the wind. Clara and Evan walked until their legs ached, their bundle of clothes growing heavier with every step. By the second night, their bread was gone, and the milk had soured. Evan's small stomach growled, and Clara's heart twisted with helplessness. She tore pieces of wild berries from bushes along the roadside, testing each one against her tongue, before handing them to him. "Are you sure they're safe?" Evan asked, his voice trembling. Clara forced a smile. "Of course. You trust me, don't you?" He nodded, chewing slowly, but as she turned away, Clara spat out the berry she had tested, bitter and sharp, leaving her tongue burning. She swallowed the taste of fear instead. Days blurred together. Sometimes they slept in fields, curled beneath their thin blanket, the night air gnawing at their bones. Sometimes they found shelter under porches of abandoned farmhouses, their shadows hidden from passing strangers. Clara always kept Evan close, whispering promises she barely believed herself. One afternoon, weary and dust-covered, they reached a larger town called Briarton. The streets were busier than Grayford, filled with carts, shouting vendors and strangers who brushed past without a second glance. For a moment, Clara thought they could disappear, here become invisible in the noise. But survival was cruel. She tried to offer her help at the marketplace, carrying baskets, sweeping stalls, but most merchants waved her away. One man sneered, "Get lost, girl. You'll scare away the customers." Hunger clawed at them again. That night, Clara stole a bruised apple from a cart while the vendor's back was turned. She split it in two, handing the larger half to Evan. He frowned. "Did you pay for this?" Her throat tightened. "Not exactly, but no one will miss it." Evan's eyes, wide with innocence, held hers. "I don't want you to get in trouble." Clara hugged him tightly, whispering, "Sometimes we do what we must to survive. But I promise we'll find a better way." The promise felt hollow. Within a week, things grew worse. A group of boys in Briarton began trailing them, mocking their ragged clothes and calling Clara a thief. One evening when Clara and Evan tried to rest near the edge of the town, the boys cornered them. "Got any food, beggars?" one jeered. Clara pulled Evan behind her. "Leave us alone." The boy shoved her. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Another grabbed Evan's bundle, laughing as he tore it open, scattering their meager belongings into the dirt. "Stop, Clara!" cried, lunging forward. But one of them shoved her harder, knocking her to her knees. The boys ran off, laughter echoing, leaving Clara trembling with fury and shame. Evan bent down to pick up the torn clothes, his small hands shaking. "Why are they so mean?" Clara's eyes stung. "Because sometimes people hurt others to forget their own pain." She held him close that night, whispering again and again, "I'll protect you. I promise." But inside, she felt the promise cracking under the weight of reality. The next morning, Clara made a choice that nearly shattered her. She approached a bakery in Briarton, her eyes fixed on the rows of bread in the window. The smell of fresh loaves wrapped around her like a cruel embrace. Her stomach roared, but it was Evan's hollow gaze beside her that drove her forward. When the baker turned his back, Clara's fingers closed around a loaf. She stuffed it under her coat and hurried away, her heart pounding. But the baker saw. "Thief!" he roared, bursting out of the shop. Clara grabbed Evan's hand, running through the crowded street, dodging carts and startled pedestrians. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop until they reached the edge of town. There, breathless, she fell to her knees, clutching the bread. Evan looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. "Clara, what if they catch us?" She tore the loaf in half, pressing it into his hands. "Then I'll take the blame. Always me, never you." For a long moment, Evan didn't eat. Then slowly he bit into the bread, tears sliding down his cheeks. Clara forced herself to eat too, swallowing around the lump in her throat. That night, as they lay beneath the stars, Clara whispered into the darkness, "Is this who I'm becoming? A thief, a liar, just like Victor said." The wind carried no answer. But deep inside, Clara knew one truth. If she didn't find help soon, if she didn't find a way out of this spiral, she would lose more than her dignity. She would lose Evan. And that was the one thing she could never allow. The days in Briarton grew heavier, each one a tug-of-war between survival and dignity. Clara's theft at the bakery had haunted her. Every time Evan looked at her, she feared he saw the shadow of a criminal, not the sister who once braided his hair in the sunlit porch of their old home. But hunger remained merciless. One afternoon, as she sat on a stone step with Evan leaning against her, a woman approached. She was tall, dressed in worn but neat clothes, her gray hair tied back beneath a kerchief. Her eyes, sharp but not unkind, studied them. "You two don't look like you belong here," the woman said. "Where are your parents?" Clara hesitated, tightening her arm around Evan. "Gone. It's just us now." The woman pursed her lips. "I run a boarding house. Could use help cleaning, mending, fetching water. I'll pay you in food. But no stealing." Understand? Clara's heart soared. Finally, a chance. "Yes," she whispered. I'll do anything." The woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Alden led them to her house, a modest 2-story near the edge of town. It smelled of soap and stew, a scent that nearly broke Clara in two with longing. She tucked Evan into a small cot and set Clara to work immediately. For the first time in weeks, they ate until their stomachs were full. Clara lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling beams, whispering silent thanks for this fragile reprieve. But reprieves rarely lasted. Within a week, Clara began noticing small things missing from the house coins, bits of silverware, even a shawl. Mrs. Alden's son, Gregory, a boy of 17, with restless eyes, often lingered near her as she worked. One evening, as Clara scrubbed the floor, Mrs. Alden stormed into the room. Her face was flushed with anger. "My spoons are gone, and Gregory swears he saw you sneaking near the cupboard." Clara froze. "No, I didn't." Gregory leaned against the doorway, smirking. "I told you, Mother. She's a thief, just like everyone says." Clara's chest tightened. "I would never. Please, Mrs. Alden, you have to believe me." But Mrs. Alden's eyes had hardened. "I took pity on you, and this is how you repay me. Take your brother and get out." Evan clutched Clara's hand, wide-eyed and trembling. Clara's throat burned with protest, but words failed. No matter how she pleaded, Mrs. Alden refused to listen. Within minutes, they were on the street again, the door slammed behind them. That night, Clara led Evan to the riverbank outside town. They huddled beneath a tree, the chill sinking deep into their bones. Evan's tears wet her sleeve as he whispered, "Why do people hate us?" Clara wrapped him tighter in their thin blanket. "Not everyone hates us," she whispered, though her own faith faltered. "But sometimes people are too afraid to see the truth." In her heart, fury warred with despair. Gregory had lied, and she had no way to prove it. She had thought they'd finally found a chance at stability, and instead betrayal had ripped it away. The following days were even crueler. They scavenged scraps, begged quietly at the market, and endured glares that made Clara's skin burn. Rumors spread fast in small towns, and now people muttered, "There's the thief girl," whenever she passed. Shame wrapped around her like a noose. She thought of Victor's words of how he had called her weak, unworthy. She wondered if he'd been right all along. One night after Evan had fallen asleep against her shoulder, Clara broke. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into the dark, "I can't do this anymore. I can't protect him. I can't even protect myself." For the first time, the thought slithered in. What if Evan would be better off without her? What if he had a chance with someone stronger? Someone who wouldn't keep failing him? The thought terrified her. But it clung. The next morning, Clara wandered to the edge of Briarton, staring at the wagons leaving town. A driver paused beside her. "Heading east," he said. "Big city out there. Easier to disappear. Want a ride?" Clara looked at Evan, his small hand clutching hers, his eyes hollow but trusting. The temptation was fierce, to vanish into a new place to start over, but she had nothing left to give him, nothing but more hunger, more shame. Her knees buckled. She sank to the ground, holding him tight, whispering through sobs, "I don't know what to do, Evan. I don't know anymore." He pressed his forehead against hers. "As long as we're together, I don't care. Don't leave me." His words struck her like a lifeline. Fragile but real. Together. That was the one truth she had left. But deep down, Clara knew that surviving wasn't enough anymore. If they stayed in Briarton, betrayal and hunger would destroy them. If they kept running, despair would catch them. Somehow she had to find another way. Somehow she had to turn this breaking point into the beginning of something new. The morning after her collapse by the wagons, Clara awoke to the sound of distant bells. Evan was still curled against her side, his breathing shallow but steady. She brushed the hair from his forehead, her chest aching. "We can't stay like this," she whispered to herself. "We'll die if we do." Her words weren't dramatic. They were simple fact. Hunger had thinned Evan's cheeks, and the nights on the riverbank had left him coughing more often. Clara knew she had to act, if not for herself, then for him. That afternoon, as they lingered near the market square, Clara noticed a man watching them. He was older perhaps, in his 50s, with a kind but worn face and a limp in his right leg. He wore the plain apron of a blacksmith soot still clinging to his hands. "You're the girl Mrs. Alden turned out," he said bluntly when Clara met his eyes. Clara stiffened, pulling Evan behind her. "We didn't do what she said." "I know," the man replied. "Gregory's a liar. Always has been." He hesitated, then added, "Name's Elias. I could use an extra pair of hands in the smithy. Works filthy hard and pays little, but it's honest. And you'll eat." Suspicion clawed at Clara. She had been betrayed once. How could she trust another? But then she saw Evan's pale face, the way his shoulders drooped with exhaustion. She swallowed. "What do you want from us?" Elias shrugged. "Nothing more than help, and maybe to keep my conscience clear." That evening, Clara and Evan followed Elias to his workshop. The air smelled of iron and smoke, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal echoing like a heartbeat. Elias set Evan by the fire with a bowl of stew, then handed Clara a rag. "Start with this, clean the tools. Tomorrow I'll show you how to hold a hammer." Clara's hands trembled as she worked, but for the first time in weeks, the knot in her stomach loosened. She still didn't trust easily, but Elias's silence was different from Mrs. Alden's suspicion. He didn't pry, didn't accuse. He simply let her work. Days turned into weeks. Clara's arms grew sore, her back ached, and her clothes smelled perpetually of soot. But they ate every night. Evan grew stronger, chasing sparks near the forge and giggling when Elias showed him how to twist scraps of iron into little figures. Hope began to flicker again. But with hope came new challenges. Clara noticed townsfolk whispering when she passed. Some muttered that Elias was a fool for taking in a thieving orphan. Others sneered that she was only there to swindle him. The gossip reached Elias, too. One evening, as Clara scrubbed soot from her arms, she overheard a customer in the workshop say, "She'll ruin you. Mark my words." Clara's throat tightened. That night she sat awake, staring at the shadows on the wall. "What if they're right?" she murmured. Elias, sitting at the forge with a pipe, looked up. "They're not. But you'll need a thick skin, girl. People fear what they don't understand. They'll tear you down just to feel taller." Clara wanted to believe him, but the words clung like burrs. The next blow came unexpectedly. One morning when Clara and Evan went to fetch water, a boy near the well pointed and shouted, "That's her, the thief." Soon a small crowd gathered. Voices rose. "Stay away from her. She'll corrupt your children. Elias only keeps her because he's desperate. Someone threw a stone." It struck Clara's shoulder, and she gasped, shielding Evan. Before she could react, Elias appeared, his voice like thunder. "Enough." The crowd stilled as he planted himself between Clara and the townsfolk. His limp made him sway, but his eyes blazed. "This girl works harder than any of you. She's no thief. And if you can't stomach that, then leave my shop and my family alone." Family. The word stunned Clara. She glanced at Elias, but he didn't look at her, only at the crowd until they dispersed, muttering. That night Clara whispered to Evan, "Why would he call us family?" Evan smiled sleepily. "Because maybe he really means it." Clara lay awake, the warmth of Elias's defense, battling the chill of the town's cruelty. For the first time, she began to wonder if belonging might still be possible, even for her. Yet, deep down, she knew the struggle wasn't over. Betrayal had scarred her, and suspicion still lingered in every corner of Briarton. If she wanted to protect Evan, and now repay Elias, she would need more than survival. She would need courage. And courage, Clara realized, was something she'd never truly tested before. Autumn crept into Briarton with sharp winds and brittle leaves. Clara had grown stronger in Elias's smithy, her arms used to the weight of the hammer, her lungs full of smoke and heat. Evan's cheeks had filled out his laughter, mingling with the steady rhythm of the forge. For the first time in years, life felt like it was building toward something rather than collapsing. But peace, Clara had learned, was fragile. One late afternoon, as the sky turned the color of cooling embers, 2 constables appeared at the door of the smithy. Their boots struck the dirt floor with authority. Clara Whitfield, one of them, barked. Clara froze, wiping soot from her hands. "Yes, you're under arrest for theft." Her stomach dropped. Evan clutched her sleeve. Elias stepped forward, his limp making his stance uneven, but his presence steady. "What's this nonsense? She hasn't stolen a thing." The constable sneered. Gregory Alden reported her. Said she took silver from his house the day she was dismissed. Claims he only just discovered it missing. The name sliced through Clara like glass. Gregory. After everything he hadn't finished with her. "I didn't," she began, but her voice faltered under the weight of old shame and new fear. The constables seized her wrists, binding them with rough cord. Evan cried out, lunging toward her, but Elias caught him. "Don't you touch her like a criminal." Elias thundered, but his protest was drowned by the clang of the door as the constables dragged Clara out into the street. Whispers spread like wildfire. By the time they reached the jailhouse, half the town had gathered to watch. Clara kept her chin lifted, though inside she crumbled. The same faces that once muttered rumors now jeered openly. She fooled Elias, knew she couldn't be trusted. Thieving girl always was, always will be. Each word was a stone hurled at her heart. The cell was small, damp, and smelled of rust. When the bars clanged shut, Clara sank onto the wooden bench, her wrists raw from the cord. For the first time since being cast out by Mrs. Alden, she felt utterly powerless. That night, Elias appeared outside the bars. His face was drawn, but his eyes fierce. "I believe you," he said. Clara shook her head, tears finally spilling. "They don't." "And what if Evan, I've got him," Elias interrupted. "He's safe at the forge." "But listen, girl, this isn't like before. You've got people now. You've got me." The next morning, Clara was brought before the magistrate. Gregory sat smugly at the front, his silver watch chain glinting in the light. Mrs. Alden was beside him, her lips pursed in righteous disdain. Gregory spoke with oily confidence. "The girl worked in my house. Days later, silver was gone. Who else could it have been? She's always had a shifty air, and I merely wanted to give her a chance to confess." Clara's fists clenched, the room blurred with heat and humiliation. The old Clara would have shrunk silent, letting the tide sweep her under. But now Evan's face flashed in her mind. Elias's booming defense at the forge echoed in her ears. She stood, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. "I never took anything. Gregory lies because it suits him. He's lied before you all know it. He threw me out with nothing but shame, and now he wants to bury me for good." Murmurs rippled through the room. The magistrate frowned. "Do you have proof of your innocence?" Clara's heart raced. Proof? She had none. But then Elias stood. "I do." From his pocket he produced a letter. "I was repairing a gate near Alden's property last month. I saw Gregory selling silver trinkets at the back of the tavern, things he claimed had been gifts from his late father. This was before he ever accused Clara. I had my doubts then, and I wrote them down. Signed and dated. The magistrate examined the letter, his brow furrowed. Gregory's smug expression cracked, sweat beading at his temple. The tide shifted. The murmurs grew louder, sharper, now aimed at Gregory. Selling his own goods, then blaming her, wouldn't be the first time he'd cheated someone. Clara's knees nearly gave out. She gripped the bench to steady herself, as the magistrate declared, "This court finds no grounds to hold Clara Whitfield. She is free." The cell door opened. Evan rushed to her, throwing his arms around her waist. Elias rested a hand on her shoulder, firm and proud. But as Clara stepped out into the street, she didn't feel only relief. She felt something deeper, rage at the injustice, sorrow for the scars of betrayal, and a new, burning resolve. She had been silenced once, nearly destroyed twice. Never again. If Briarton wanted to call her a thief, she would live so honestly, so fiercely that their words turned hollow in their own mouths. For the first time in her life, Clara wasn't just surviving. She was fighting to belong, and she wasn't fighting alone. The days after the trial passed in a blur. Clara moved through them with an unfamiliar mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time in years, she was not carrying the weight of suspicion alone. People looked at her differently now, not all but enough to matter. At the market, an older woman who had once whispered behind her back pressed a loaf of bread into her hand. "I misjudged you, child," she murmured, eyes lowered in shame. Clara accepted it silently, her throat tight. Forgiveness, she realized, was harder to carry than scorn. Evan thrived in the forge, his cheeks glowing from the firelight, his laughter ringing out as he tried to mimic Elias's movements with a too large hammer. Elias pretended to scold him, but never hid the glimmer of pride in his eyes. For Evan, the forge became more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary, where he could finally be a child without fear. For Clara, though, the path forward was heavier. The wounds Gregory had carved into her life were still raw. At night, she sometimes woke trembling, her dreams full of voices calling her thief, her hands bound once more by rough cord. But each morning when the forge roared back to life, the heat steadied her. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purple and gold, Elias sat beside her on the bench outside the smithy. He stared into the distance, his limp more pronounced after a long day's work. "You've got a strength in you, Clara," he said quietly. "But strength isn't just for swinging hammers. It's for shaping the way others see the world." She frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "When you're ready, you'll take what was meant to break you and use it to build something better." His words clung to her long after he went inside. The chance came sooner than expected. A month later, a new girl arrived in Briarton, thin, hollow-eyed, barely older than Clara had been when she'd been cast out of the Aldens' home. The townsfolk muttered the same words they once spat at Clara: trouble, ungrateful, bad blood. Clara's chest tightened. She saw herself in the girl's hunched shoulders, her desperate silence. And for the first time she understood Elias's meaning. The next morning, Clara approached the girl outside the bakery. "You're hungry, aren't you?" she asked gently. The girl's eyes widened with suspicion, but she nodded. Clara handed her half a loaf, warm from the oven. "Come to the forge. It's hard work, but Elias will treat you fair. And Evan could use a friend." The girl blinked back tears. "Why would you help me?" Clara smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "Because once someone helped me when I thought the world had shut its doors." Word spread quickly. Some scoffed, muttering that Clara was foolish to bring another stray under Elias's roof. But others remembered the trial, remembered Gregory's lies, and stayed quiet. Slowly, suspicion gave way to something else, curiosity and even respect. Months turned into a year. The forge became more than a place of work. It became a refuge for the unwanted, the bruised, the outcast. Clara worked side by side with Elias, her hands steady on the anvil, her voice steady when new faces arrived trembling at the threshold. She wasn't just shaping iron, she was shaping lives. Yet through it all, she never forgot the betrayals, the loneliness, the ache of being cast aside. Those scars became her compass, reminding her to listen when others turned away, to believe when others doubted. One crisp winter morning, Clara stood outside the forge, watching Evan chase snowflakes with a grin that lit up his whole face. The new girl Mara was laughing too, her cheeks flushed. Clara's heart swelled. Elias joined her, his breath clouding in the cold. "You've done it," he said softly. What Clara asked. Built something better, out of nothing but ash and iron. Clara thought of Mrs. Alden's cold dismissal of Gregory's lies, of the cell that once felt like her grave. She thought of the whispers that had branded her a thief, and the way those same whispers had faded into silence. "I didn't do it alone," she said. Elias nodded. "No one ever does." Clara looked out over Briarton, the town that had broken her, judged her, nearly destroyed her, and felt something she'd never expected, not bitterness, but belonging. She was no longer a shadow slipping through its streets. She was a part of it now, forged stronger by the fire that had once threatened to consume her. And she knew this was only the beginning. Final reflection page. Clara's story is more than a tale of hardship and resilience. It is a mirror of countless lives shaped by injustice, betrayal, and the quiet strength it takes to rise from the ashes. As I reflect on her journey, several layers of meaning unfold, each carrying lessons that feel both timeless and deeply urgent for our own world. At its core, Clara's suffering began not with her own mistakes, but with the cruelty of others, Mrs. Alden's cold dismissal, Gregory's manipulative lies, the townsfolk's quickness to judge. What strikes me most is how easily an entire community was willing to brand a young girl as guilty, not because of evidence, but because suspicion is often easier than compassion. This reveals a painful truth. Society frequently punishes the vulnerable, not for what they have done, but for what others project onto them. Clara's imprisonment, literal and emotional, speaks to the experience of many who are misunderstood, misrepresented, or betrayed. How many people today are quietly enduring the weight of false assumptions, gossip, or prejudice? In workplaces, schools, even families, reputations can be shattered in moments, and rebuilding trust can take a lifetime. Clara shows us the cost of such cruelty, but also the possibility of transcending it. What resonates most profoundly is the turning point of her story, when Elias chooses to see her humanity instead of her reputation. His choice was small in action, but monumental in impact. He offered her dignity when others denied it, and that spark of compassion reshaped the trajectory of her life. This reminds us that redemption often begins not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of belief, offering someone a place, a chance, or even a kind word. Yet Clara's strength does not end with survival. She doesn't merely endure. She transforms her suffering into something constructive. Her decision to help Mara, the new outcast girl in town, reflects the deepest kind of resilience, the ability to extend empathy after enduring pain. Instead of letting bitterness close her heart, Clara chooses to break the cycle of cruelty. She becomes, in essence, the very person she once needed. This shift is profoundly moving because it embodies a universal lesson. True healing often comes not from revenge or vindication, but from creating spaces where others no longer have to endure what we once suffered. Clara's forge is more than a workshop. It is a metaphor for what we can all build out of our brokenness. On a broader level, her story invites us to reflect on how communities treat their most vulnerable. Briarton, like many real societies, was quick to judge and slow to listen. But when one person, Elias, dared to defy that pattern, the ripple effect began. Over time, even the townsfolk who had condemned Clara began to soften. This reveals something hopeful. Cultures of cruelty can be changed, but only if individuals choose courage over conformity. From a personal standpoint, Clara's journey teaches me the value of scars. Too often we view scars, emotional or otherwise, as marks of shame. But Clara shows us they can be maps guiding us towards empathy, strength, and purpose. Every betrayal she endured sharpened her awareness of others' pain. Every loss deepened her ability to give. Her brokenness was not erased, but reshaped into resilience. For all of us, there is a practical call to action here. We live in a world where judgment is often immediate, amplified by gossip, rumors, and even social media. It is easy to label, dismiss, or condemn. But Clara's story reminds us to pause to ask, what if there's more to this person's story? What if they are carrying a burden I cannot see? Offering belief instead of suspicion, support instead of scorn, may change the course of someone's life. And for those who have been in Clara's place, misunderstood, betrayed, or abandoned, the story offers hope. Your worth is not defined by the voices that reject you. Healing may not come quickly, but with time, the fire that once threatened to consume you can forge you into something stronger, more compassionate, and deeply human. In the end, Clara embodies the quiet power of perseverance. She proves that dignity can be reclaimed, that compassion can grow from suffering, and that even in the harshest fires, something beautiful can be forged. The real-life lesson is this: we must choose daily between being like Gregory the betrayer who destroys, or like Elias the quiet redeemer who believes. And if we have known Clara's pain, we have the power to be like Clara herself, someone who transforms scars into strength and builds a future where others no longer have to bleed as we once did.